Hey everybody, I made 4 different microgreens about a month ago and I haven't had time to edit and make this video until now. I created it in a different format, but I learned so much during the process that I felt like my original videos format just won't do it justice. So I'm going to do a voiceover instead, and I'm going to be going over a few things. First, I'll do the microgreens growing process, and then second, I'm going to talk about the 4 microgreens that I grew, how they tasted together, how they grew together, and those 4 were broccoli, mustard, cilantro, and pea shoots. And then I've also got lots of tips and trips that are going to be filtered throughout here. I did a few tests between this one and the one that I did last time. So, all right, into the growing process. First, I would soak your seeds overnight, anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. The small and hard seeds especially, they say that it's not necessary, and if you don't want to, you don't have to, but I didn't do that. I did not pre-soak them this time, and I found that it really slowed down the process. And I think you could use this to your own benefit and maybe pre-soak half of your seeds while not soaking the other half, and then you could plant them at the same time, and you may or may not receive 2 different harvest times within a day or 2. So I'll have to test that out maybe in the future. I haven't done it yet, but I would think that it would work because of how much faster they grow after they've been pre-soaked. I did find recently though that you may not want to soak like softer and larger seeds for extremely long time, so you'll want to keep it 12 hours and under. All right, so after soaking, you're ready to plant them. I just did a light layer of compost on the bottom of my tray, and then I used just a starting seed mix, a seed starting mix soil on top, just a nice light fluffy soil. And you want to make sure that you get them nice and flat across the tray. I didn't do this, and it kind of made it hard when I started to plant my seeds. So you're just going to want to use your hand. You don't want to like press it down, but you do want to make it nice and even. Now, seed starting soil is very dry, and it can actually be hydrophobic. So for every 4 quarts of soil, you're going to want to add 1 quart of water, and you're going to want to do this at least the day before, probably 24 hours before you're actually going to be using this soil. And you can speed that process up with warm water, but I would just use the cold water, do it the day before, and if that's not enough, you can add a little bit more, but you're not wanting this soil to be muddy at all. You just want it to obviously have moisture within it. And the reason you want to wait is that you'll pour a whole quart in there and it'll just disappear on you, and so it will take that kind of day to get it nice and full of moisture. So I prefer using compost, but there are other options. You could use coconut coir or peat moss. It looks like with peat moss you're still going to have to mix in some soil with it, and with all of these, you're going to have to add water in first. You're going to have to pre-hydrate these soils before you use them. Coconut coir, a lot of people in my last video commented, and I may be something I want to try in the future. For now, I really enjoy using soil, and I couldn't personally find many uses to use the coconut coir over just a starting seed mix. Seemed to be about the same price. The mats may have been a little bit cheaper, but it looked like the main benefit is if you were maybe in an indoor space and you were using coconut coir, you may have less of a mess than you would with just a regular soil. So a small side note, the tray I used had these small indents instead of just an open tray, and the trays I'm using are all 10 by 20, and I did not enjoy these kind of slotted individual rows trays. Although it kind of made it nicer to cut, it just felt like it was like harder to keep those seeds evenly and distribute them in the way that you wanted. It kind of forced you into something. And so I just got 10 by 10 ones, because for my family of 4, I found that those 10 by 20 trays were they were still too much food. They were just too much microgreens for us, and my mom does several other microgreens, so we didn't just have those trays. But I found if I'm going to just be growing one type, I'd rather just use a 10 by 10 tray. All right, so after you've created this nice flat space for your seeds, and then you're going to put them on there. So for 10 by 10 trays, you're going to use 4 to 8 tablespoons of seeds for that tray. So if you're just looking at a 5 by 5 space, then you're going to be talking like 1 to 2 tablespoons. And you want to probably measure this out, especially in the beginning, because it can be really hard to see how many small seeds should I use and how many of the larger seeds should I use. And so whether it's small seeds or larger seeds, it's going to be about 1 to 2 tablespoons for the a 5x5 space. And if you're not pre-soaking your seeds, kind of a hack I found that I didn't do this time, because spreading those seeds can always be pretty annoying, and you mainly just want to make sure they're not overlapping, but they can stick together when you pre-soak them because they all have water on them. But you can just use an old seasoning jar and find the right little holes, and then you can just use the seasoning jar and mix them, and that will help them spread evenly. But you'd probably only be able to do that if you use dry seeds. But yeah, and you just want to make sure that the seeds are not overlapping. Now, after you've got your seeds on the tray, you're just going to want to spray them down one more time, and then you're going to put another tray over the top of them. And this is going to allow them to be in a dark place. It's going to hold in moisture, and it's going to force the microgreens to push that mat up, to push that tray up, which is going to develop their stems a little bit more. It's going to make them grow taller. And I found that this makes it, I did not do that this time. I just put a clear tray over them. I found that they grew slower that way. They didn't grow as tall, so it made it harder to harvest. And they just weren't as tender when they didn't have that time for that stem growth and that time without sunlight. All right, so on day 4, they're probably going to push that tray up, and you're going to notice it. And by then it's time, usually about day 4, take them off and put them in under your grow light. And so I used a grow light this time. I think that the grow lights can be really nice if you're doing a lot, but even though it's winter here and we don't get that much sunlight, I think that I was more than happy with how much they just naturally got from the sunlight. And I actually kind of prefer it. I feel like under the artificial light, they get almost a little too green and a little too, they almost have a different taste to them. And I might be crazy on that, but I just prefer using the natural sunlight after I use the grow lights this time. And then at this point, you're probably going to have to water again. And all you're going to do is just kind of pick up your tray, and you can tell if it's light and airy, then it needs water. And after the 4 days, it's pretty much going to need water no matter what. And then as the microgreens grow more and more and it gets heavier, it might be hard to notice whether or not they need water. But if they start drooping over, then you know that they need water. And it gets to the point with like a larger tray that they might need a 10 by 20 tray that they might need a quart every day. So you can eat all of these seeds up until they're true leaves, which are completely different. I'll try to show a picture than their normal leaves, and it's very obvious when they grow them. And they also, the seeds have all the nutrients they need up to that point, but I found using compost and soil seems to just make it taste better than not having that extra nutrients. So even though you can not grow them, they seem to grow better if they do have some sort of compost. And then if they get to the point where they have grown their true leaves and you're still eating them, which at this point they can get a little rough, so I like to eat them before they're true leaves, then you do want to start adding like an extra fertilizer in the water, such as a fish fertilizer. And when you're watering your plants after they've grown stems and leaves, you no longer want to use a spray bottle. You're gonna want to just use a jar, and hopefully you can have another tray underneath and the tray above it would have holes in it. If not, you're just going to pour your water into it. You don't want to spray it because that can promote mold growth. So when you're done with them, whether you've finished them all or you haven't, you can feed them to your chickens. You can put them in your compost and let it compost. But you're not going to want to use the same exact things again, and you'll be able to tell just the amount of roots that will grow through these things. In the small tray I was using, the entire bottom was just a mat of roots. So, all right, now, how did the microgreens that I chose grow together? So the mustard seeds and the broccoli seeds, they grew together perfectly, and their seed sizes are about the same, and they're both hard shell. And so alfalfa actually is very similar to this, and I'm going to be doing a sprout video on that soon. or I may have already done it depending on when I post these. But I think all three of those would grow very well together. They kind of have the same density. The seeds are the same size. They seem to grow at the same exact time. And so I think that they would also be a perfect mix. Alfalfa is very like soft and tender, and it doesn't have a ton of flavor, but it still tastes nice. And then while the mustard and the broccoli microgreens are both almost spicy like, especially the mustard, but the broccoli even is very spicy. So they could make like a very good salad together. The pea shoots are something that I definitely would like to grow again. I'd like to grow them by themselves. They kind of got crowded out by other things as it took them so long to grow. And then all of a sudden they grew up, and then they kind of blocked out other things. So it wasn't a big deal, but I just feel like they didn't really grow well with the other things. And I enjoyed them enough that I would probably just want to make a tray of their own. And one thing that's nice about them is you can harvest them as they've gone up a little bit and just go about halfway. And then you can allow them to continue to grow, and then you can harvest them again. But the more you do this, the rougher and tougher the stems are going to get. But the pea shoots were just very enjoyable, and I think you could add this to the pea shoots to just about any salad that you could imagine. Now, the cilantro seeds, this is something I would never grow with this grouping again. The cilantro seeds grow very, very slowly, and so you're left with your cilantro seeds, and then you have the rest of this tray that you're just left to deal with. And personally, it's kind of frustrating to see this whole space with just the cilantro. But I definitely think if you like cilantro, the texture is a little bit different, but it tastes just like fresh cilantro. It's maybe not as strong, and it's maybe not as fresh tasting, but it has that strong cilantro taste. And so if you don't like cilantro, you're not going to like cilantro sprouts, but it's great with omelets. It's great with tacos, anything you would use a cilantro with, it's great with. The one thing you need to make sure you check with the cilantro is the seeds, the coriander, will stay on top of the microgreen, and if you shake them, some of them will come off, but some of them will stay strong, so you're going to want to pick them all off, because if you do bite onto them, they can chip a tooth. They're extremely rough, and they are not fun to deal with, but they're all very obvious. So I would definitely grow them again, the cilantro, but I would just never grow them with something like the other things again. I would just grow them by themselves because they're so much later than everything else. All right, thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. If you enjoy this type of content, please give me a follow. Hope you have a great one. See you next time.